Welcome back to the Highlight Your Healing podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Roan. And today I have a very special guest joining me who I believe is going to speak directly to some of you who are in a very tough season of life. She is passionate about walking alongside women who are navigating some of life's most unexpected identity shifts. My guest today is Monique. She helps women answer one of the hardest questions you can ask yourself. Who am I when the title is gone? Today, we're going to talk about what happens to your confidence, your identity, and your sense of self when job loss enters the picture. Monique, I'm so glad to have you here and welcome to Highlight Your Healing.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right, Monique, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, and what led you to the type of work you do today?
Absolutely. It's not lost on me that when previously asked, tell me about yourself, I would lead with the title. But I have decided to not do that and tell you actually about who I am and who I have now discovered myself to be. I am a very bubbly is what I like to just say, a bubbly woman who, God has gifted in several ways. I like to think that I am a strategic thinker. I'm a prophetic intercessor. I am married to a really great guy and a mom to a really great girl. I'm a native Californian, and now we live in Dallas. And professionally, I have an 18, which is crazy to think about, your career in retail strategy, in business development, and in higher education. So the combination of the three makes for a pretty, you know, colored professional life.
Can you walk us through your journey of job loss, what that
Mhm,
looked like for you, how you got to the other side of it? Because it's a conversation that not a lot of women or people in general like to talk about.
mhm,
Um, we feel embarrassed about it when we had that conversation.
mhm.
So, can you talk a little bit about what did that look like? What emotions did you experience in those early days after that?
Yeah, so I want to also say that I did not realize this until my most recent layoff that I've been laid off. I'm a millennial for context, and I
Hmm.
had been laid off from every job that I've had, every single one. I did not realize it. So when you graduate college right around or right before the economic bubble bursting, you get your good job. So at that point, I was after college graduation or undergrad graduation, I was a buyer for Nordstrom. I was doing really well. I was very excited, even though, it wasn't the career field well, it was always a career field that I desired. I wanted to be in fashion. I wanted to be in corporate retail. But I went to school for political science, law and society, kind of to check the box. And so when, I was working there for a couple of years, and then the economy blew up because of the housing crisis. And so Nordstrom went from regional buyers to national buyers. And I lost my role there, moved back home, started my family, ended up opening up a clothing boutique, had that for 4 years and sold when my husband got orders to go overseas, but also, concurrently was working in education because my daughter wasn't school age yet. And then when I went back into the workforce, full time, I was working for a school that doing strategy and kind of, engagement strategies and things of that nature for students, and trying to figure out how we maintain our accreditation and, grow and all the things that the key markers that we were looking to achieve. And then was laid off 4 times in the matter of 4 years. And so after 31 days, they would find a job for me, a new school within our network to work for. That was like exhausting. I didn't really realize it because I was just kind of going along. And then after about year 3.5, I said, okay, I can see the glass ceiling. Like I no longer want on, this ride. I want something more stable. And so I'm going to go back, go to grad school round two. And in this case, I decided to pursue my MBA. So we moved from the UK to Dallas, and I decided to pursue my MBA. About 5 months into my MBA program, I was recruited by Amazon, and I, in a similar kind of role trajectory that I was on with Nordstrom, so in commerce and strategy and leading teams of that nature. Um, about two, I would say maybe 6, 7 months into my time at Amazon, I was like, oh wow, the stories are true. This is definitely, a pace or an environment that I would say, even though I met so many great people who I still keep in touch with today, and learned so many things, it was not one that like I would say produced the healthiest version of me. So I
Mhm.
was absolutely out of balance, working all the time, family kind of suffering, traveling a lot for work, all these things. About 2 years in, I started feeling very ill. And I started becoming like I was, starting to be afraid to fly, which is so foreign for me, and just really dealing with heightened anxiety, et cetera. So I decided to take there were some other things kind of going on within the organization. I said, I'm going to take a leave of absence and just, reset, recalibrate. About 2 weeks into my leave of absence, I got a meeting request from HR, and ultimately my role was eliminated. And I was like, how do you lay somebody off while they're on their medical leave? But because there were these grand sweeping, which would later, on we found out that it was 27,000 people, that there were 27,000 people that were laid off. It was permitted. And I will tell you that I tend to be, especially at that point, kind of a slow processor. I do believe that shock is a gift from the Lord, in some senses, because I don't know that I would have been able to deal with the weight of the blow that I was about to walk into and kind of have to walk through. All at once. And so for the first month or so, it was right around the holidays. Actually, it was about 2 weeks before Christmas of 2023, and I was just kind of stunned, and I was like, "Okay, well, I still have to deliver, the Christmas spirit and kind of keep going." I had family that was coming to visit and all those things, and so that was in my mind, but once that shock wore off, I mean, Shannon, I was absolutely devastated because I
Mhm.
did not know for the entirety of my adult life, I did not know who I was outside of what I produced. I did not know who I was outside of my title and my occupational, career pursuits or the accolades and the things that I've earned, the achievements that I reached, the milestones, like all those things were great senses of joy and fulfillment for me, which is in and of itself, innocuous. But I think ultimately, at some point, it turned into an idol for me, and the destruction of that idol, the understanding of, wow, like you are so much more. Even though you think this is something that is phenomenal and significant, which it is, and God has gifted you in this, like who he calls you is way beyond what he's allowing you to fulfill in the assignment of your career. And I think for the next 2 years, honestly, I walked out a very fruitful but very painful realization that my identity was not in my title alone.
Right. And, so many women experience that. It's not something that we think about, right? That
Mhm.
it's going to impact your identity, but it has been a part of who we are for most of our lives. So when that time comes, when you get that phone call or that email saying, hey, I'm sorry, your position has been eliminated, there's all of that secondary loss that comes behind it. So as you're going through this whole transition, did this experience cause you to rethink your career path or what you wanted moving forward?
It did. So there's that's a double-sided coin. On the one hand, I still very much so love corporate retail. I love retail strategy. I find a lot of enjoyment and am fueled by having a conversation with leaders or building teams and saying, okay, this is what we want to achieve, right? These are the goals that we're looking for. These are this is the impact that we want to have. These are the people that we want to speak to. This is the type of business prototype that we want to build. Like I love those conversations. I love just thinking when I look back on some of the things that I, was able to do either directly or through my team, and some of the conversations I was able to have and decisions I was able to inform, like those things are still very like light giving for me. They are still things that make me smile and make me really proud of myself. And so on the one hand, in rethinking what I wanted to do, that part didn't change. But now when you ask me, I remember going through the interview process, shortly thereafter, and I was interviewing with Microsoft, and someone asked me, what do you see for yourself in the next 5 years? And I said, honestly, I think that I'm coming out of a fog, and I definitely sees
Right.
myself, within this company and fulfilling this particular position. But when I think about where I see myself in 5 years, I'm not really thinking as much about my position that I'm thinking about my lifestyle. So in 5 years, my daughter will be in college. If she calls me on a Thursday and says, "Hey, I'm homesick," I would like to be on a red eye that Thursday night out to go see wherever she is. I want to invest in friendships more intentionally. I want to make sure that I'm spending time with my family. Like, those type of things. Like those are the things that really, really matter the most to me. And so while I still would love to be doing components and pieces of what I've done my entire career and what I dreamed about even as a child, I joke about saying I used to watch Who's the Boss, believing that I was Angela Bauer, like I will be her. And I don't think that has changed, but there's been a right sizing, and there's been
Right.
a lot of reflection that has now, when I look at it and when I think about what I want to do, I want to do it, but I want to do it correctly. I want to do it in a way that does not eclipse who I am, that does not take away from who I am, that looks at it as like this is a stream of enjoyment, this is a stream of fulfillment, but this is not my identity as a whole.
Absolutely. It's definitely not a part of your identity, right?
Yeah.
Any advice you would give for the woman who she's built her whole life around what she does?
Mhm.
What would you say is one of the first steps in starting to separate who she is from what she does?
Yeah. Well, here, let me tell you something. So, shortly after I lost my job, there was a leadership conference that was happening, and it was like a quarterly business luncheon at my church. And my husband was like, "Do you want to go?" And I was like, and I just started crying. And he was like, "Well, why are you crying?" And I said, I no longer feel like I belong in that room. I'm no longer an executive." And he said, "No, you were always an executive. You are no longer filling that role within the company that you left, but you are always an executive." And so that taught me a lot. And I thank God for him. I thank God for his encouragement and the community that he provided and the salve that he placed on my heart during that time, because now I'm able to tell the woman who is experiencing or feels like she's preempting that season, that hey, everything that you are in the role has already been placed inside of you. Those things are, we talk a lot about transferable skills. If you're an executive in the role, it means that you are hopefully an effective communicator. You are, able to you have high executive function. You're able to organize and be a good administrator. You build people. You understand the infrastructure of teams. Those things do not stop just because your title isn't there. And so, really being clear about whether I have this title today or if I do not have it tomorrow, the core of who I am, the how I treat people, how people experience me, what I want, what my impact is, and what I want it to be, all those things remain. They cannot, nobody, no layoff, no life circumstance can take that from you. And so, if you attach those traits, those characteristics, those strengths, even the opportunities and weaknesses that you have or things that you want to shore up, if you attach them more closely to who you are than your role or your occupation, you will be able to come out of any transition sure-footedly, right? Not feeling unstable or maybe wobbling a little bit, but still having a pretty solid understanding that you did not with layoff, firing, transition of any kind, like they can't take that from you. So don't relinquish it, right? Because you feel like since your title has changed, so has your character or so have your qualities, your traits. That is a lie. It's not
Mhm.
true. And so being very clear about who I am, starting with my character, starting with, my skills and qualifications that transcend any role you fulfill is really, really, really important. Getting clear on that identity, starting there is something that I would encourage anybody to do. Again, whether you're walking through the transition or you just see what the marketplace trends are and say, at some point, this is a possibility. So, do I know who I am, or do I believe that who I am is only connected to and anchored in what I do?
Right. No, I love that. And that's really, really good feedback. So
Mhm.
we talk a lot about faith as well. So faith plays a big role for a lot of women that you speak to.
Yeah.
How does faith factor into rebuilding confidence and identity after a loss like this?
Yeah. So, I one of the things that I'm really grateful for is I grew up in a home that was very active in our faith, right? We were not people that just went to church. We read the Bible. That was a requirement. My mom would tell me things that I'm like, that I still hear in my head today. Thank you, mom and dad, for those things. But I will say that the last couple of years, like the Lord has allowed me to fall in love with the reading of his word all over again. And the reason why that's so important is you don't know for women of faith, I mean, for anybody, but specifically for women of faith, you do not know, you will not be able to know who you are if you don't know who he is. And you can't know who
Right.
he is if you're not spending time in the word, right? And so I
Mhm.
think about how many times there was a period of time when I was like, God, I feel like my skills are regressed, or regressing. I've been out of this. Things change, especially in technology, so quickly. I don't want to have to explain, it still be sad and have unresolved emotions around my job loss and then explain the gap of employment, like all these things, and the Holy Spirit spoke to me and said, remember what Moses said when I told him to go? He asked the Lord, who will I say sent me? And God was like, I am. I'm everything that you need. Like you tell them, I don't want to hear any more disqualifications. You may not think that you're eloquent in speech, but it doesn't really matter because I have stamped you with my approval. I have given you the go ahead. I've given you the assignment and I want you to go on my credibility above all things. Right. And so when I talk to women, whether casually or from a consulting perspective, especially about, inflection points and transitions and things of that nature, I can't help but to talk about God because of how there are many people in my position who would have lost their minds, would have absolutely lost their minds, but he's kept me and he's kept me stable. And every fear that I've had coming out of, corporate and into something new, he has silenced and satisfied through his word. And so knowing that I can stand on here are all the things that I fear or my concerns and the disqualifications that I have of myself. And I have a God that was like, yeah, but this is who I am, and so if I am this and you're made in my image and likeness, you have everything that you need to go forward in this next role, in this next position, in this next chapter of life. I do not want you to waver in that confidence, right? And I just
Right.
really started the more that you read and understand the word of God, you understand his character. And so I've learned of him anew that he is a God that is a shield, a buckler, a stabilizer. When we are armed with him and we have the helmet of salvation, that means that, I have a sound mind. I'm not worried about all the external things and factors that may come and to cloud and pollute my vision and my how I feel about myself, right? He keeps my heart tender. He keeps me believing that the best is indeed yet to come, and that I can press forward with faith and optimism, and that if I need to pivot in strategy, he'll give that to me too.
Absolutely. Yeah, you are definitely you saying a whole word right now. A
It's
whole
been a
word
journey.
and
It's been a journey. The oil is not cheap.
at all. Wow, Monique. What do you want every woman listening today to walk away knowing?
Okay, I'm going to say this to two different categories of women. If you have been recently or over the period of your career impacted by layoffs, especially layoffs at a higher level or ones where you're like, I was, scoped for higher and scoped for more, and I had great feedback and all these things, these points where you're like, there was never a point where where I earned or this was merit based in terms of, being let go or what have you. I can't emphasize enough the importance of being very, very clear, writing things down, illustrating them if you can't write because it's painful and you just need to draw. Writing down what God says about you, what he calls you, right? And when he calls you something, it's not attached to a worldly or an affirmation that man can give. And so in the introduction I said, I'm a strategic thinker. Although somebody on earth can definitely affirm that or validate that, My strategy comes from my connection to God, who is like, build it this way. This is how exactly how I want you. He's so meticulous and design. I had to understand who I was in light of who he was. And I will say that when you are in the transition or preparing for a transition or you feel it coming along, understanding who you are in light of who he is will be the thing that keeps you stable, because none of those traits, characteristics, or callings, gifts, none of those things nobody can take away. There's nothing that any company, whether it's a Fortune 1 or, a gas station down the street, nothing can impact that. And so being very clear about who he calls you, and who you are outside of the role you fulfill is really important. And is, I think, paramount in both grief and healing, because sometimes we grieve, and we grieve for long periods of time because we don't have anything to replace that grief with, right? But when you're able to replace, I'm the statement, I was laid off, and all the feelings that you feel, I felt absolutely worthless. I felt, what else am I good at? What am I going to do now? Like, what do you mean I have to say no to an invitation to the Louis Vuitton cafe? Like, what? I don't understand, right? Because I have to be prudent in a new way. I don't know how long I'm going to be out of work, like all those things. But God was like, yes, but that doesn't change the fact that I've called you. That the gifts that I've placed inside of you, I'm not taking them back. They're irrevocable, right? Who I've called you and what I called you yesterday, I still call you today. And you have an opportunity for an additional depth, right? Additional layer of depth and skill and security and all the things that you desire to be built. Now, if you are not in that position, but you are kind of itching for more, or even sometimes more being less, right? Where you have had the stability, you've been in industry or in a role for a long period of time, you don't foresee any changes in that, but you know that God is calling you to more. So maybe he's calling you to walk away from your job. Maybe he's calling you to resign. I don't know what that feels like. Maybe he's calling you to make a different move, or create something or build something that is counter to what you normally would think. I would say in any transition or with any inflection point where you see the glass ceiling above you, you recognize that there's room for more. Be very clear on your why you want to do, or why this is being impressed upon your heart, and ask God to give guidance on what does this look like in terms of my impact? Like, how does this ladder up to the assignment that you've given me or the calling that you placed on my life, right? Because sometimes we get scared and we make decisions out of fear, and they may not be what he's called us to do, but when he places something in your heart, you are able to go to him and ask, okay, cool. I'm what you have my yes, but tell me either how to do it, why to do it, or what it connects to so I can make sure that I'm following you correctly, right? I'm following your lead in the right way. So I'm not looking for selfish ambition or vainglory. Like, I'm doing this with the right heart. Um, and then both of those things, like both of those veins and those lanes, being having a deep resolve and an unshakable understanding that your value and your worth has never been attached to, never been connected to, or solely dependent upon a hat that you wear. Your acceptance, your value, your skill, your worth, your impact, the enjoyment that people have in, when they're around you, that is because of who you were created to be, right? Your laughter or your wit or your, whatever it may be, your understanding of people. One thing that I love about my husband is that he is very likable, but he's able to understand, like, kind of work a room. Like, I know how this person wants to speak, or how I can connect with them and how to connect with that person. Like, there's this just seamless transition between personalities that
Right.
he has that I really appreciate. And I'm more like direct, like, okay, no thank you small talk, like anybody who wants to have just a very quick direct exchange, I'm your girl. And so I like, those are the things that people love about you. Those are the things that people love. It. Those are the things that you can lean into. They are things that will comfort you and give you, a deeper understanding of who you are and who you're created to be, and being very clear about that being a part of your value proposition, or that being the keystone, and the core component of your value proposition versus what you do. How you earn your living. Separating the two of those things will be so freeing, and may be hard for a while, but will ultimately produce a fruit that allows you to navigate, any future seasons.
Monique, this conversation has been so good, and so timely. I know our listeners are walking away feeling inspired, empowered, and the reminder that you can navigate change without losing yourself is something that we
Mhm.
all needed to hear.
Yeah.
Monique, before we close, can you just share with our listeners where they can connect with you and learn more about what you have to offer?
Sure. So you guys, I am in my on my social profiles, you're going to get a very casual view of me. There'll be a combination of family photos and livestock, love and faith-based things. And so don't expect something that is super curated, but you can follow me on I think I'm probably most commonly on Threads, but Threads and Instagram at Monique Jackson King. I am a consultant, and so I do have availability to connect with you should you be at an inflection point and you want to talk about what leadership looks like next. And you can email me at hello@moniquejacksonking.com.
All of Monique's information will be listed in the show notes. I really hope today's conversation encouraged you. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode, because trust me, we have more incredible guests and conversations coming your way. And if this episode blessed you, I would love if you just take a moment to leave a rating and a review. It helps more women find this show and join this community, and that means everything to me. Until next time, keep highlighting your healing.